26.4 Class structure struggle. As mentioned earlier, competition, strife, conflict, and struggle are inherent among classes in society. Marx propounded that inherent in the structure of classes was the identification of a common class enemy as an entity against which all the members of a class would unite. If there was no class enemy, the people of a class would compete with each other and fiercely, and there would be no class solidarity or class cohesion. Marx maintained that when a large scale industry is set up, scores of people comes together in the search of avenues in subsistence. Naturally, they compete with each other on several counts, but their common wages, common interest against their superiors, and other similar conditions keep them united and curtail competitions among themselves. The capitalistic, on the other hand, unite in the idea of repression. In the event of united capital, the working class forms associations. The interests that they define are class interests, but the struggle of a class against another class is a political struggle. It may be appreciated that the conflict between classes is restricted to the race for economic rewards and resources. It also develops because of psychological sufferings that accompanies alienation of labor. As specialization and division of labor set in, the laborers get more and more alienated from the production process. This alienation gets initiated at the times when the capitalistic represents to the single workman the oneness and the will of associated labor. It is developed in manufacture that cuts down the laborer in detail laborer. It is completed in modern industry, which makes science a productive force distinct from labor and presses it into the service of capital. Marx explained that in a capitalist system, social productiveness and development of production are carried out at the cost of the laborer. This is done through excessive domination over and exploitation of laborers. The laborer is reduced to an appendage of the machine. The work itself loses charm. Laborer loses the motivations to work to his fullest potential. The conditions under which he is made to work are not encouraging. All this is done to accumulate capital. As the large of the capitalist to accumulate capital increases, the plight of the laborer worsens. Marx was sure that the class conflict under capitalism leading to revolution and consequent overthrow of capitalist class would establish the workers as the major agent of social change. He envisaged that over a period of time the social division would cease to exist, and with that would also end the exploitation of one class by another. The change would take place when the dissatisfaction of workers would convince them completely that the capitalism needed to be overthrown, and that the way to do is towards revolutionary political organization. The laborer has to emerge as a strong political power and collectively negotiate for power. Marx's predictions of a proletarian revolution is based on the premise that capitalistic society would affirm conditions that established and consolidate the position of two main classes in society, the bourgeois, and would surrender human values in the icy waters of egoistical calculations. The proletariat, on the other hand, working in the constraints of factory productions, given to object degradation to that collapses family life, religious beliefs, and national characteristics, they would rise to regain humanity. This prepares conditions for revolutions that would usher in a new social order in which the process of material production would be consciously regulated by freely associated man. Weber, on the other hand, believed that the relative control over goods and services that constitute the groundwork of the conception of class produces income, opens up possibility of procuring other goods, provides social position and provisions a certain style of life. Those in common class situations are often led to similar sentiments and ideas, but not necessarily to concerted action. Class organization emerge when there is an economic opponent. Weber proposed that it becomes important to curtail the competition when the number of competitors increases with respect to the profit span. For doing this, one group of competitors adopt some characteristics of its actual or political potential group of competitors. The characteristics are extremely identifiable, such as language, religion, descent, residence, and others. Sometimes associations are formed with irrational regulations. Over a period of time, if monopolistic interest persists, competitors establish a legal order that limits competitions through formal bodies. Weber refers to this as domination by virtue of constellations of interest. Monopolizations call for constitutions of common front against the interest of outsiders and solidarity of those who constitute it. The organization of the group in defense against the interest of outsiders bring an end to further competitions. The membership to the group is restricted to ensure monopoly, and participation is controlled to ensure solidarity. If the monopoly is rooted in law and the government enforces restrictions, then it is easy to restrain the competitions and exercise control over the members of the organizations. Weber referred to this and domination by virtue of authority. 26.6 Social mobility. By social mobility is means transition of individuals from one position in the social hierarchy to another. Here we restrict the use of the term to mean movement between class positions. The concept of social mobility presupposes that people's positions in modern class societies is not determined and fixed by virtue of their birth in a particular class. That an individual has the option to make transitions between classes is the very basic of social mobility. The movement from one class to another may occur either in the lifetime of an individual or even a span of general or more. When an individual moves from class to another in his or her own lifetime, for example, a person who joins services as clerk and through a series of promotions become a managing director of the company, the mobility is referred as an intragenerational mobility. On the other hand, when mobility occurs between generations, for example, children, carpenters, or cobblers become accountants, engineers, or doctors and take up higher social positions than those of their parents, the mobility is referred as an intergenerational mobility. Mobility may be both upward, as when the son of a blacksmith adopts the profession of a chartered accountant, or downwards when the son of a doctor becomes a typist. Box 26.2 Social mobility, motivations theory of Veblen. Those members of the community who fall short of a somewhat identifiable indefinite normal degree of prowess or of property suffer in esteem of their fellow men, and consequently they suffer also in their own esteem, since the usual basis for self-esteem is the respect accorded by one's neighbors. Only individuals with an aberrant temperament can in the long run to retain their self-esteem in the face of the disesteem of their fellows. So as soon as the possession of property becomes the basics of popular esteem, therefore it becomes also a requisite to that complacency which we call self-respect. In any community where goods are held in severity, it is necessary in order to ensure his own peace of mind that an individual should possess as large as portion of goods as others with whom he is accustomed to class himself, and it is extremely gratifying to possess something more than others. But as fast as a person makes a new acquisitions and become accustomed to the resulting new standards of wealth, the new standard forthwith ceases to afford appreciably greater satisfaction than the earlier standard did. The tendency in any case is constantly to make the present pecuniary standards the point of departure for a fresh increase of wealth, and this is in turn gives rise to a new standard of sufficiency and a new pecuniary classification of oneself as compared with one's neighbors. So far as concerns the present questions, the end sought by accumulation is to rank right in comparison with the rest of the community in point of pecuniary strength. So long as the comparison is distinctively unfavorable to himself, The normal, average individual will live in chronic dissatisfactions with his present lot, and when he has reached what may be called the normal pecuniary standard of the community or of his class in the community, these chronic dissatisfactions will give places to restless straining to place a wider and ever widening pecuniary intervals between himself and his average standard. The invidious comparisons can never become so favorable to the individual, making it what he would not gladly rate himself still higher relatively to his competitors in the struggle for pecuniary reputability. It may be understood that in industry societies, the rate of intergenerational mobility is significant. It is common to find children joining the workforce at a higher positions than the one their parents attained when they started work. This happens because industry societies lay emphasis on formal education as the time of recruitment. Children of working class parents often gains the qualification before they set out to look for employment. Further, upward social mobility is more common than downward social mobility because the demand for unskilled manual labor has declined significantly in the wake of technological advancement and the shift from the need for industry workers to service that call for specialization entail higher position. More and more children find that higher positions are open for them and that opportunities are much more abundant than those available to their parents. Movement across a short range of positions in the social hierarchy is more common than movement across a wide range. People usually find it possible to improve their position marginally than to improve it substantially. In the context of social mobility in America, Marx noted that the classes have not yet become fixed. This is constant flux of elements between them. Weber emphasized the non-economic forces and the desire for independence among the farmer workers in the German economy. In fact, the emphasis on the role of non-economic forces and the different social mobility of the Catholics and Protestants was the starting point of his thesis on the relationship between the Protestants' ethic and spirit of capitalism. The writings of Marx and Weber generally influenced Sorokin's study of social mobility in America, English, and several other societies. Sorokin Sorokin stressed the extent and rapidity of the growth of new middle class of salaried employees in capitalistic societies and concluded that the larger scale intergenerational and intergenerational mobility occurs in the occupational terms. More and more men were found to shift from the manual labor non-manual forms of employment. He accepted that the children seems to more likely to enter their father's occupational group than any other, and that mobility is more likely to occur between occupational groupings within the same class than between groups in different class. He maintained that the membership of social groups consists of two elements. One is the relatively permanent and stable. The other is ever changing with entry into the occupation for a particular span of time, then exit from it and entry into another one. Working class cannot be treated as an agency of social transformations for two reasons. One, there is a declining permanent element within the working class, and the social democratic and communist affirmations are likely to be rejected by the expanding fluid element, and the revolutionary capacity of working class gets diminished since it is made up more some those who are incapable of social upward movement on the other hand, the caliber of its leaders on the other hand. Sorokin contends that the mobility of mobility rates and mobility patterns do not follow an identifiable design or pattern, and even if proletariats get the opportunity to be dictators, they would not be able to achieve much. Lipset and Mendix upheld that the industrializations led to high mobility rates. What is more interesting to note is their observations that the overall platform of social mobility appeared to be the same in the industrial societies of various Western countries. This is better known as Lipset. Setterberg's of the Lipset thesis. Setterberg was the co-author of the first paper in which this generalization was proposed. Lipset and Bendick's study differs significantly from Sorokin's story that is concentrated on movement from manual to non-manual occupations, which they defined as upward mobility, despite the fact that they were aware that some white-collar positions are lower in income and prestige than industrial manual work. Another crucial study on social mobility in America was that undertaken by the Balu and Durkheim. They began the study with the assumptions in that systematic exploration of occasional status and mobility were important in understanding social stratification. They confined that the rate of mobility between the blue collar and white collar occupations was only little among the various industries and societies. Their claim was, however, that elite mobility in America was exceptionally high. This was perhaps due to high level of popular educations in the United States and lesser emphasis on formal distinctions of social status. They also maintained that most men in America do not attain his occupational status but do not go to important their standards of living, hence their social status by way of raising conspicuous consumption. Finally, they noted the stability of American democracy is undoubtedly related to the superior chances of upward mobility in this community. Its high standard of living and the low degree of status difference between social strata of these conditions make it unlikely that the large number of unprivileged men are experiencing an oppression, despair of all hope, and becomes dissatisfied with the existing system of different rewards as well as with political institutions that they join extreme political movements committed to violent rebellion. Goldthorpe, Llewellyn, and Payne best speak of three major themes these social mobility. The first thesis of social mobility is the counterbalance thesis, attribute to Westergaard and to Parkin. The counterbalance thesis proposes that the opportunities for intergenerational mobility have expanded, but these are countered by a decline in opportunities for intragenerational mobility. This has happened because of the growing professional bureaucratifications and the technically complexity in work. So greater social mobility takes place intergenerationality. At the same time, there is lesser possibility of upward movement in the course of an individual's working life. Goldthorpe, Llewellyn, and Payne contradict the counterbalance thesis through their findings based on older and younger cohorts in the sample. They concluded starting in employment than it has been for the older group. Average avenues for upward mobility of the work class have increased due to wider education opportunities. At the same time, none of the traditional adventures for upward mobility are closed. The second thesis of social mobility is the closure thesis, attributed to Giddens, to Bottomer, and to Miliband. The closure thesis suggests that those who occupy the superior position seek not only to retain them for their own selves and for their children, but also acquire control of resources so that they are able to achieve what they want. The closure thesis suggests that those who occupy the superior position seek not only to retain them for their own themselves and for their children, but also to acquire control over resources so that they are able to achieve what they want. This means that Social mobility remains confined to lower positions while higher positions are not open to its effects. Glodthorpe, Llewellyn, and Payne refuse this claim after studying a higher degree, grade degree, studying higher grade professionals, administrations, managers, and proprietors. They demonstrate that while only 1/4 of them are born into this class, more than 1/4 of them came from manual working class backgrounds. Thus, from being close to lower class, the top class was found to be heterogeneous in composition. The third thesis of social mobility is the buffer zone thesis, attributed to Parkin, to Giddens, to Bottomore, and to Westcott and Russell. The buffer zone thesis, however, that the social mobility in large part is confined to skilled manual and routine clerical grades, which often change places with each other but rarely move much higher and much lower in the system. The short range of mobility is restricted to buffer zone, which is constituted of manually non-manual boundary reconstructed longer range mobility, which would lead to heterogeneous elements on their side. Goldthorpe, Llewellyn, and Payne suggest that if there is no buffer effect against upward social mobility, there could be one in the regions of downward social mobility. Therefore, is thus a kind of one web screen that allows upward movement and restricts downward mobility follows. 26.6 Classlessness. For long, class relationships have been recognized as an integral component of social structure. Their importance in regulating economic and political domains of the life has been of life have been well accepted. In academic discourses too, much attention has been laid on the analysis of class and class relationship. Marx emphasized that the overall of capital class by the revolutionary working class, the abolition of private property and capitalization were the preconditions of classless society founded on equality of condition. He projected that once the capitalistic class was overthrown, new ruling class now constituted the proletariat would dismantle capitalism. This would be understood as the conception of one classlessness. After this period, translation, the older conditions of production that lay at the root of class conflict would be done away with. It is then that class distinctions would cease to exist, and the foundation of the class society with free development of one's all would be laid. Hence, any one social group would not monopolize economic and political power. This is a conception of social cleanliness. The third conception of classlessness is that the multi-class classlessness, in which conceptions of a classlessness is that of multi-classes classlessness, in which equality and fragmentation of class structure exist simultaneously. Weber argued that there were no escape from bureaucratic dominations. Socialism, he maintained, would aggregate rather than eliminate the problem. Bureaucratization thus involves equality and of treatment, favoring the leveling of social class privileges. The socially privileged, however, close opportunities for others. Weber discussed classlessness in terms of provision of equality of quantity is following the bureaucratization. At the same time, he expressed a reservation against the anti-democratic nature of bureaucratization itself. Reservations against the anti-democratic nature of bureaucratization itself, with the opportunity to reach the knight position is available to all. The social and economic status of an individual is not determined by birth. Everybody may be able to make use of the opportunity so that seems to be available to them in order to enhance their social position. This is irony inherent in multi-classness. The three concepts of classlessness discussed here, vice under classlessness and total classlessness and classlessness do not ensure. The term the end of the class as a relevant opportunity of sociological analysis for class is the common encountered reality in society. Reflections and affections 26.2. Can there be a society without classes? Discuss. 26.7. Conclusions. In this unit, we have tried to understand the different conceptions of class, beginning with the wide concept of class. It would be clear by now that sociologists have proposed different determinants and criteria for defining class. These range for the economic positions of a group of persons to their position in the market situations. Underlying all the theoretical propositions is the understanding that classes constitute the most comprehensive groups in social structure. They are associated with the system of privileges and discrimination, and that there is scope of mobility between classes. The classes therefore cannot be defined as a watertight compartments with rigid boundaries. 26.8 further reading. Bendix R. S. M. Lipset, Karl Marx Theory of Social Classes. Thorpe, Social Mobility and Social and Class Structure in Modern Britain, Oxford, Clandestine Press. Social Class and Stratification. References: Aristotle, Politics, Vaginal Jadwal, Modern Library, New York. Aaron R. Two definitions of class. Bendick R. S. M. Lipset, Karl Marx Theory of Social Classes. In class situations and power, social stratification in competitive perspective. Scheinhead, Bendick and Seymour Lipset's Root Edge and Kegel, Paul, London. Bendix R. 1956. Work and authority in industry, ideologies in management, in the art of industrialization, Bailey. Bailey. 1969. Social inequality, Penkin. In Balu MPM or Duncan. 1967. The American occupational structure, Willie, New York. In 1959, class and class conflict in the industry, routed and began Paul, London. Goldthorpe, J.H. It is in Social Mobility and Class Structures in Modern Britain. J.H. Lurlin and P. Catroin Payne, 1987, Social Mobility and Class Structure in Modern Britain and Oxford University Press. And other book is that A Theory of Social Mobility in Class Status and Power of Social Stratification in Comparative Perspective. Karl Marx, 1936, Capital, Modern Library in Rome. Mill, C. Wright, 1954, The New Man of Power, New York, Yosowski. Different conceptions of social class in class status and power, social stratification, comparison, perspective, reinterent Bendix as Seymour, Martin Lipset, Routledge and Kagan, Paul, London. In 1990s, Social Class and Stratification, Routledge, London. 1934, The Theory of the Leisure Class, The Modern Library. And 1968, Economic and Social, Volume 1, 2, 3, Bedmine Anister Press, New York. Bright ECO, 1989, Classes was London. So this is the end of the unit 26. Thank you very much.